Tokay geckos, once thought of as a junkyard gecko, an awful animal that no one would ever want because they're just too mean, aggressive, and bitey, have now turned into, well, quite a popular pet, which then begs the next question of, are they going to be a good investment reptile in the future? Now, in order to answer these questions, we are going to have to dive into a couple topics. Those topics being the overall care of the animal, the overall costs that they have, what the competitions look like, the marketability, is it a saturated market, is it a little bit of an open market, and then lastly, just some quick tips and tricks that I have found through my years of breeding Tokays that can be useful for you if you're trying to start out in an investment opportunity with this animal. Yeah, that's the conversation for today, diving into Tokay geckos being a marketable animal. Stick around, we've got some great advice going on, and subscribe if you're new, right down there. Let's get into it. So kicking things off, let's talk about the care of the animal. Of course, care is a vital thing talking about. Is this going to be a lot of a time-inducing thing, a labor-intensive thing? Is this a sensitive animal that we're going to have to take a lot of time in caring for? Or is it going to be more of the hardy and easier species, in which case that much time is taken out of our day working with this animal, in which case it just makes our lives, well, a little bit easier. When it comes to Tokay geckos, there really is no easier gecko. Maybe the crested gecko, but as far as Tokays go, they have to be one of the hardiest geckos that I know. These guys are lean, mean, biting machines. What they lack in personality and handleability, they make up for with ease of care and, well, just being an overall hardy species, being a nice, thick-built animal that is not gonna go anywhere if you miss a mistake or two when caring for them. For those of you that are interested in knowing the overall care, we did go into a care guide right here. I'm not gonna list every care thing because that would, well, make this video a very long video. What I can say is Tokay geckos, while being a very hardy species, still need somewhat of care parameters. The number one being the heating element. Tokay geckos needing a basking temperature somewhere around that 90 to 95 degrees, and overall are just needing to be a little bit warm than your standard New Caledonian gecko. As far as that goes, I think that's the only drawback as far as the care goes, or added expense, if you will. They do need some sort of basking temperature, or if you're like me and you happen to own, well, 20 geckos, you can offer something like ambient heating. I usually have an enclosed area where I heat my reptiles up to around the 85 to 87 degrees, making sure that ambients are good, those animals are warm and good to go. Of course, Tokay geckos being insectivores, all you're going to need is a variety of insect diets. Mostly for me, feeding over here at DBCB Exotics, we are using crickets and some sort of roach, whether that be dubia, red runner, or lobster, and then the occasional treat for superworms. As far as I've known personally in my experience with them, I have found that Tokay geckos aren't the most adventurous dish feeders. They usually need it to be moving, which is why crickets seem to be the best choice for the Tokay geckos. Just them being a more active feeder, and the Tokay geckos just liking that a little bit more than your average roach that likes to really just burrow underneath the substrate. That's about everything I can think of as far as care goes. The only other thing I would mention is the fact that Tokay geckos being the second largest gecko you can own in captivity, you may need a bit of a larger setup. Usually, with something like crested geckos, gargoyles, you're gonna get away something like a 58 quart tub. It's not gonna be the case with your Tokay geckos. Them being just a larger gecko, somewhere around the 12 to 13 inch range, you're gonna need a bit of a larger setup for them to contain them and make sure that they're thriving in captivity when you are attempting to breed this species. But moving on, I think that's all the care stuff you guys need to know about. Like I said, we got that care guide back there if you're looking at getting the extra stuff. But other than that, let's get into our second topic at hand, which is going to be number 2, the overhead costs you can expect when breeding Tokay geckos. Now, when talking about overhead costs, this seems to be a pretty downside of breeding Tokay geckos. They aren't gonna be as easy as your average crested gecko, the pre-made crested gecko diet, you put it in a tub, you're good to go, you're spending, well, $100, $200 a month, depending on the size of your collection or breeding projects. Tokay geckos are gonna be a little bit more in-depth when it comes to the cost-wise, especially startup costs, and then just your annual costs through electricity and feeders, things of that nature. Biggest expenses when breeding Tokay geckos are gonna be these two things. That's going to be the electric cost and then the food bill. The food bill seems to be very high for my geckos, and that usually stems from the case that most of them only enjoy to eat crickets versus the reptile or the feeders that I feed for my reptiles, which seems to be the roaches and worms that they, well, really don't like that much, unfortunately. I can give you guys a quick example of what the food bill looks like over here at DBCB Exotics for roughly 20 Tokays and then a little bit of miscellaneous stuff. We got the cave geckos, leopard gecko, chameleon, so a little bit extra. We feed around 3,000 crickets every 3 weeks, which usually costs me somewhere around the $60 to $90 price tag. That being if I need some smaller animals for the, the baby geckos, some smaller crickets, or if I can just get away with getting all the 3/4 of an inch cricket that well. It is a bit of an expense. It's a little bit more than I would like to pay for. I wish I knew how to breed crickets. I have tried multiple times, however, I just can't do it right. I don't know. I'm doing something wrong over here. If we have any cricket breeding experts, drop a comment down there. I would love to know how to breed them, and just lower this feeding cost a little bit, because it is it's a lot. That's a lot of money. Second biggest cost you're gonna have is your electric. Now, whether you are doing this in a variety of different things, whether that be using basking lights like, well, the lights that are all around me for different species. For my Tokay geckos, I accumulated just too many Tokay geckos where the cost of getting all the lights, the bulbs, you know, the bulbs are gonna burn out every couple of weeks. That's just what the heating bulbs seem to do. I've opted for using ambient heating, so I have an enclosed system. Here's a video right there going a little bit more in depth, because you're gonna hear me say I have Tokay geckos in a grow tent and think to yourself, he's doing what now? That video explains it all, but we'll get back to that. So pretty much what I'm doing now is using ambient electricity and ambient heating. I have a space heater plugged into a thermostat that just gets the entire room, which is about a 5x5 space if I'm not mistaken, up to that certain temperature that I desire, somewhere around that 86 to 88 degrees like I mentioned a little bit earlier. Now, even though we aren't using lights and I have saved money with those lights, my electric bill is still somewhere around the $200 range. Now granted, that is have to do with a couple of extra basking bulbs that I use for my Argus monitors, Tegus, I have a frilled dragon up there as well, some quinces. However, I know the large bulk of that electricity cost is stemming from that grow tent that is using the space heater to heat that ambient heat. Can I say ambient heat one more time? Those are pretty much going to be your biggest overhead costs when it comes to Tokays. Of course, startup costs coming from enclosures. I really do opt for using somewhere around aquarium, glass tanks, or your PVC. I've tried using plastic tubs in the past. It does not work very well. Of course, plastic being a little bit more porous than your average glass enclosure, it's gonna be scrubbed down, disinfected a little bit more. It's more work. I would end up paying a little bit extra for those glass enclosures just to give you a little bit of an easier time and making your gecko a little bit happier. They're able to stick on the glass a lot easier than your standard plastic tote, things like that. So pretty much your biggest expenses are going to be the glass aquariums, they're going to be your heating needs, and then your feeding needs. Those are the three big ones. You can expect a monthly cost if you're doing anywhere of around the size that I am, which is around 20 geckos. You can spend a bill of somewhere around $200 to $300 with the feeding cost and the electricity bill at a monthly pace. All right, Dakota, you've really made this sound like not a good investment opportunity. All I'm hearing is money sucking out from Tokay geckos, eating it, and then basking in it. So is there really any ups to these animals? Can they really be an investment animal for 2022? I'm glad you asked. Let's get into that next part, which is going to be a pro, and that's going to be number 3, the marketability for Tokay geckos. I know it is the strangest thing, and I know people are coming to this video and thinking to themselves, there's no way you can sell Tokay geckos. They are an awful animal. They have such a negative stereotype. There's absolutely no way. And trust me, I thought the same thing. Tokay geckos started out with me at DBCB Exotics as a passion project. I really just enjoyed the Tokay gecko. I enjoyed the temperament. I enjoyed the intelligence behind the gecko, and I wanted to reproduce that, seeing the paternal instincts, how the mothers are maternal and the dads take care of the babies, how they can grow up with each other almost in a colonizing setting. I wanted to experience all of that, and I really thought from the bottom of my heart that my biggest drawback was going to be actually figuring out how to sell these babies. And more, I really just could not be more wrong about that statement. Tokay geckos have absolutely been my biggest seller over here at DBCB Exotics. I cannot keep them in stock for any amount of time. Pretty much every, I'd say 1 to 3 days, I get at least 1 to 5 messages of people asking me, hey, do you have Tokay geckos available? When are we gonna have some Tokays? Can I put money on Tokay geckos? I wanna get on the list of Tokay geckos. People, I know it's crazy, but people are just crazy about Tokay geckos. And the thing is, with this being such a new craze for the Tokay geckos, there really are little to no breeders going about it. There seem to be around 5 top dogs. That is going to be Denise over at Lucky Foot Geckos, CPX Reptiles. We're going to have Alejandro over at Emerald Exotics. I'm so sorry if I got that wrong. We've got there's a few. There's a few. I'm so sorry if I didn't get your name in there. Those are just the 3 I talked to the most. Homegrown Scales is another one. There's not very many Tokay breeders out there. Coming from when we're talking about stuff like ball pythons, crested geckos, you can go on Morph Market and just see thousands upon thousands of animals for sale with hundreds and hundreds of breeders doing it. You can hop onto Morph Market where you see just around 9 Tokay geckos for sale at this point, which means your competition for selling your Tokay geckos are those 9 people versus the thousands and thousands if we look at more competing markets, like I said, such as ball pythons and crested geckos. Probably thinking to yourself at this point, okay, Dakota, there are some drawbacks for the gecko. It isn't as safe of an investment as I would like. There are going to be some overheads. However, the market is pretty open. I can have a pretty easy time sliding into it, breeding some babies and then selling those babies. But Here's the big question I'm sure many of you are asking. Just how much are Tokay Geckos worth? The last time I saw at the Expo Dakota, it was a $15 gecko. How could I ever make my money back of a $200 investment piece of a monthly thing that I'm spending? I don't see the numbers there, so please, Dakota, tell us those numbers. Well, and I'll tell you that with number 4, which is actually the marketability for the animals, or really the value of what the Tokay Geckos are worth in this day and time. Don't look at this video 5 years later, because they probably won't be worth this much. Tokay Geckos have absolutely exploded with market value. I'm saying they probably, from the time that I started breeding Tokay Geckos, which is around 3 years ago when I first started looking into Tokay Geckos, what they are worth, how much they were going for, I could find stuff like the powder blue patternless, which is a very popular morph when it comes to Tokay Geckos. A lot of people love the powder blues. Of course, how could you not? It's a slick back, completely blue, almost glowing Tokay Gecko, and really awesome choice of people that want to get into the genetic side of things. I remember buying those geckos for around $300 to $400 as sub-adult babies, old enough where you can sex them, probably around that time of 3 to 6 months of a range. Those geckos are now worth triple the cost. You can find powdered blues from somewhere around the $800 to $1,100 price tag. In just 3 years. In those 3 years, they went from $300 to now $900. Absolutely insane. Kind of makes me wish I bought more powdered blues in the beginning of this. That can be seen in a variety of different choices, pretty much every gecko mutation that we have, and unfortunately there is just a select few. As far as I can remember, we have the reduced pattern, powdered blues, olive patternless, and then more of the high tier, more valuable options, that being your platinum line, your super reds. There's a couple obscure stuff such as green galaxies, of course the unknown genetics of granites that I will dive into in a separate video. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of geckos, while not many mutations, those mutations however, seem to be climbing in value quite steadily, even within the short amount of time of those 3 years that I've been talking about. That's really gonna bring us to, well, what the big question is for this entire video, and that's going to be number 5, can you make money breeding Tokay Geckos in 2021? In my honest opinion, I do believe that Tokay Geckos are a very solid investment. I would really like to see more people producing these animals, not just for what we've been talking about, the marketability for them, you can make money for them, blah, 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 but just the fact is that we need more captive breeding specimens out there. Of course, the wildlife trade and the wild-caught market, the importation market is just vast with these geckos. You've seen all the expo tables, the tables at the pet shop, little enclosures for $15, skinny, malnourished, dehydrated gecko for 15 bucks. I want to see that change. I want to see the wildlife market almost diminish, maybe not entirely so we can get new bloodlines continuing on the captive breeding train, but enough to where not only does the wild population grow, the import market grows from that $10 to $15 up into a nice steady, just a little bit more. I never want to see a reptile worth $15. That to me screams throwaway reptile to the impulse buyer. That's something we don't want to see. What I would love to see more about the Tokay market is just a flood of captive bred specimens to where the wildlife market really just isn't as needed as much as time goes on. But at this point in time, I do absolutely agree that the investment opportunities for Tokay Geckos right now are super high. We are in an uphill slope. The geckos seem to be gaining more and more valuable as the popularity of them increases. As far as an investment opportunity and making money for geckos in 2021, I believe your Tokay Gecko is going to be a solid investment that, if you can deal with the little bit of biting and the attitude and the squawking, things of that nature, you're not only gonna realize that these geckos are absolutely incredible and have just a wonderful personality, quite an intelligent gecko comparatively speaking to the other things you can hold in captivity, but you might put a little extra money in your wallet. So I don't know, in my opinion, it seems to be a win-win. And there you have it, folks. Can you make money breeding Tokay Geckos in 2021? But now it's your turn. Leave me a comment in the comment section. What did you think about this video? Are the pros bigger than the cons, and do you think this is a solid investment? Or do you think I'm a little bit out there, I'm a little bit nutty for thinking you could actually make money breeding Tokay Geckos? Yeah, drop a comment. As always, if you guys want to buy some animals from me, unfortunately we are sold out of Tokay Geckos until 2022, but if you would like to talk to me a little bit more about Tokay Geckos, you can always find me over at Facebook and Instagram. We are also on TikTok. If that's your thing, doing some short, funny bits, you can find me there, but Facebook and Instagram is where the business stuff takes place. And of course, not to forget Patreon. Patreon.com/dbcbexotics. This is where you get the up-to-date updates with everything that's been going on within my breeding business. This includes a plethora of breeding projects such as New Caledonian geckos, Tokay geckos, geckos that we were just talking about, cave geckos, ball pythons, we have some monitor lizard side action, we got a lot of stuff going on that you definitely don't want to miss. There's a bunch of different tiers for a bunch of different folks. We got the behind the scenes contents, we have more business videos such as this one, where I really break into the marketability and really how to break into the market of Tokay Geckos, how to do it the right way, kind of a learn from my mistake kind of thing. Doing this for a couple years, I really wish I did a lot more things different, and I will showcase that exclusively on Patreon. Absolutely love my Patreon members over here, including our newest Patreon member, Shane O'Neill. Now, Shane actually is the first person to ever go into the top tier of the DBCB Exotics Patreon page, the DBCB Exotics Apprentice member, I do believe. It's the highest tier, it's a huge shout out. I absolutely love the support from you guys. We actually did a brief video call not too long ago for a filming this video. Great people, I had a great time talking to them, awesome people. And well folks, that is going to wrap the video up for today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to follow me over here at DBCB Exotics. We'll see you next time, but until then, goodbye.